Hello everyone, welcome to LearnDax channel. My name is Desh and in this video we are going to simplify the concept of rolling average in Power BI. So in order to calculate rolling average, we are going to again use the filter and the average x function. So if you want to understand how the concept of rolling sum works, then you can check out my previous video. I'll leave the link in the description because after watching that video, it will be very easy for you to understand this video because it kind of builds upon the previous video that I have created for the concept of rolling sum. So what is rolling average? So rolling average is essentially, let's say you have data for going for consecutive days like day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. And let's say you don't want to find the average but the rolling average, so that if I have sales for the date of 1st July, 2nd July, 3rd July, 4th July, 5th July, and I want to calculate the rolling average, then what I'll tell Power BI is, hey, just take the sales of day 1 and day 2 and give me the average of day 1 and day 2. Then take the sales of day 2 and day 3 and then give me the average of day 2 and day 3. Then take the sales of day 3 and day 4 and give me the average of the sales of day 3 and day 4. So we are kind of rolling over. So as we are moving along the days, we are kind of building upon that average. Now, how do we achieve that in Power BI using DAX? That's what we're going to look in this video. Now, again, the formula for this is something that I've looked up on the internet. I'm going to break down that formula, how the iteration works, how the averages function works, how the filter function works. And so let's get on with the formula for DAX. So here I have the formula for the rolling average. So while it might look very big at the beginning, but trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand every little part of this formula. So let's start with what's exactly this if function. Why do we have this? So for the time being, we can ignore this, but just for our understanding, the reason why we have put in if function is we are calculating here the rolling average for 3 days. So what we are telling DAX using this if function is that until and unless I get 3 days of sales, you're not supposed to give me the rolling sales or rolling average. When you get 3 days of sales, then start calculating the average. Like for example, on day 1 and day 2, there haven't been 3 days of sales, so it should not give me the average for day 1 and day 2. But the moment I have sales for day 3, then I have data for day 1, day 2, and day 3. Then you should start calculating the rolling average for 3 days. So that's what I'm telling Power BI using this if function. I can change this value to 3, 4, 5, 6 based on the number of rolling days that I want. But accordingly, I'll have to change the value here as well. So right now it is showing 2, which means it's going to subtract date minus 2 to give us the rolling average for 3 days. If I make it 4 year, I have to make it 3 year. If I make it 5 over here, I've got to make it 4, and so on and so forth. So now let's break down the formula. So in my previous video, I had explained you the concept of rolling sum, in which we were going to iterate over the sales table. And in this case, the sales table, I'll just show you. So this is a very simple sales table. There is no product, there is no other sales table. This simply has days, data for 12 days and having sales amount for each day. And we are just going to calculate the rolling average for 3 consecutive days, which means if I have data for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd July, on the row of 3rd July, I should get the average of 600 plus 650 plus 700. So let's just do that manually first and see what is the answer. So I'll just add up 600 plus 650 plus 700. That gives me 1950 divided by 3. So I should get 650 in this particular row when I've calculated the rolling average. And let's also validate it for the second row. Now that we are using calculator, let's just see. So I'll start with 650 for 2nd July plus 700 for 4th July plus 750 for 650, 700, and 750 divided by 3. So I should get 700. So I should get 650 and 700 on the 3rd and 4th July respectively. So let's see what happens. And let's again take a look at the formula, like what are we doing? So first of all, we are going to use the average x function. So the average x function is going to calculate the average. It is going to take those three values over which it has to calculate the average. But how are we going to pass it three values? And again, the average x function works on two arguments. The first is the table and the second is the expression. So the expression is fine. We are going to take the sales amount from the rolling sales table. So that part is fine. How do I pass in three values at a time is what we are trying to figure out in this case. So we are going to use the filter function just like we did in case of rolling sum that I have explained in the previous video. And we are going to source the data from the rolling sales table. And we again use the all function because we want to negate any filter context that can come up either externally or internally. So for that reason, we are going to use the rolling sales table. Now, the conditions that are being fed into the filter table are that the rolling sales date has to be greater than equal to maximum of rolling sales date minus 2. So what do we mean by that? So to explain that, I'm going to use Excel where I have created this particular table. So for the first iteration, when it is going to go on the date which is 1st of July, the rolling sales date is going to be 1st of July. So if I go back to Excel, sorry, if I go back to Power BI, I see that the first condition is the rolling sales date has to be greater than or equal to maximum of rolling sales date minus 2, wherein we are checking that the 1st July has to be greater than or equal to 29th of June. So do we have 29th of June in our table? No, we don't. So it's going to compare it with the 1st of July itself. Now there is an and condition, and the rolling sales date has to be less than or equal to maximum of rolling sales date. Now, when you see maximum of rolling sales date, it is actually the sales date in this current context. So when I am iterating in the first iteration on the 1st of July, the current context says that the maximum rolling sales date is 1st of July itself. And how do I get that? So again, I'm going to open Excel, and in that the rolling sales date in the first iteration is 1st of July. In that context, the maximum of rolling sales date is 1st of July. Now, the difference between rolling sales date and greater than or equal to maximum of rolling sales date minus 2, that range comes out to be 29th of June till the 1st of July. So we are going 3 days back. Now, what are the filtered dates? It's only 1st of July because we don't have either 30th of June or the 29th of June in our table. So eventually the number of filtered dates is 1, which is less than 3. And as per our condition in DAX, if there are less than 3 values, then it should give me blank as the output. Now let's go to the second iteration. In the second iteration, the rolling sales date is 2nd of July. Again, in this context, the maximum of rolling sales date is going to be again 2nd July. Now, when you take the difference between rolling sales date and max rolling sales date, which is again 2nd of July in this context, minus 2, then it goes back to the 30th of June. And how many dates are getting filtered? Well, in this, we are going to get 1st of July and 2nd of July because in our table, in our rolling sales table, we do have data from 1st of July, which means in my second iteration, two dates are going to get filtered. And that's what's being mentioned in this particular table, that this is going to filter me two dates. But again, are the number of filtered dates 3? No. So again, it is going to show us a blank value. Now let's move on to the third iteration. The filter function is going to go to the 3rd July and again say the rolling sales date in the third iteration is 3rd of July. The maximum of rolling sales date in this current context is 3rd of July. The difference between rolling sales date and max sales date minus 2 days is 1st of July. So going back 2 days, it's going to give me 1st of July. And when I count from 1, 2, and 3, I get 3 dates. So the filtered dates are 3. The number of filtered dates are 3. So I have 3 rolling sales amount. I have 3 sales amount, and I can find the rolling average. Now from the third iteration, it starts getting 3 values and it starts calculating the rolling average. So if I again go back, I go to the fourth iteration, my rolling sales date is 4th July. The max rolling sales date in the current context is 4th July. The difference between the rolling sales date and rolling sales date minus 2 is from the 2nd July to the 4th July. So I get three dates, I get three sales amount, I can calculate the moving average, which in this case is going to be 650 plus 700 plus 750 by 3. And again, so on and so forth for the fifth iteration as well. We have 5th of July. Go back by 3 days on the 5th of July. It starts from 2nd of July. I get three dates. I get three values. It's giving me three sales amount and it is calculating the sales amount. So what's happening is when I'm calculating, when filter is iterating, dynamically processing three filtered values and passing it to the average x function. And once it passes it to the average x function is calculating the average and then giving me the output. So what's happening essentially is in the first iteration, this is the table. In the first iteration, this is the table that is being processed by the average x function. Okay, I'll just put it here as the first iteration or maybe here. Okay, in the second iteration, what it's processing is these two values. So I'll paste it here and I'll call this iteration 2. In the third iteration, it is considering these three values and from this is the point from where it starts to actually calculate our rolling average. So I'll call this iteration 3. And in the fourth iteration, it has these three values rather. And then it starts calculating the rolling average from a particular iteration. So, like I said, from the 1st of July, it has 600, 650, and 700. So, if I go to the table of iteration 3, the values that it's using are 600, 650, and 700. If I go to the fourth iteration, the values it's using is 650, 700, 750. If I check here, it's 650, 700, and 750. So dynamically, filter is processing the values, giving the average x function three values at a time, and then calculating the average. So now let's put this in practice and check in DAX if it is giving us the correct output. So we have already studied this formula. Now I just have to drag this measure onto this table and then let's just check. So we can validate for iteration 3, 4 and 5 because we've already done that in Excel. So if I go to Excel and I check that for the third iteration, my rolling average is 650. So if I go back into Excel, into Power BI rather, the value is 650. Now if I go back to Excel and check the average for the fourth iteration, it is 700. So if I go back to Power BI and check the value for the fourth iteration, it is indeed 700. And just the last check going for the fifth iteration, which is 700 plus 750 plus 800, which is giving us the value as 750. And as we can see here, the value is 750. So this is what I wanted to explain in this video for the concept of rolling average and how you calculate it. I've tried to simplify it as much as I can, and I hope that by the end of this video, you actually got to understand something about rolling average. And if it helped you, please let me know in the comments. Please share it with your friends. And if you feel that there are any gaps in my delivery, in my teaching, then do let me know in the comment section. And like I always say at the end of every video, thanks for watching and happy learning.